discovering what is the significance of what I've read, or what's the significance of this information I've looked at, so that you can make claims, or so that you can come up with original ideas. So some words that we're going to look at through the rest of the lesson include qualitative research and quantitative research, analysis, interpretation, and topical. Now, argumentative essays, especially qualitative ones, rely on analysis. It's perhaps easier to describe the process of uncovering the significance in a quantitative essay rather than a qualitative one, even though what you are asked to do is to write qualitative essays in this class. But writers dealing with the concepts in the sciences and STEM fields, you think science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and I could write that down, STEM, science, technology, education, mathematics. They often analyze raw data. We're talking about numbers, percentages, statistics. And so those writers will interpret the numbers and they'll describe their significance. And that is quantitative research. Really, we can say, it's about quantity, how much or how little. But you, in this class, will be working on qualitative research. So that root word is about quality. And these are more dealing with ideas. Okay. But quantitative writers, they might look at a data set and they might come up with some kind of conclusion about the data set. So maybe they would look at a data set like this. This is IQ score distribution. An IQ test is supposed to measure what's called the intelligence quotient, which is essentially the ability to recognize patterns. Now, if you look at this graph here, what you see is a curve, and as well as scores down here. So 55 is pretty low, and you see that really nobody has much lower than a 55. And then you see 145 is pretty high, and nobody really has much higher than 145. It's very rare to be lower, very rare to be higher. And you can see that the greater percentage of the scores are between 85 and 115. So you can start interpreting data, and you can start saying things like, okay, is this 68% of the population falls between these two numbers. 95% falls between these two numbers. Now, if we think back to some of our critical reading and apply it to graphs, well, you would want to start asking questions like, when is this test given? Who is taking this test? do children that are in families with you know poorer parents score lower or higher than children with parents who are wealthy? So does wealth play a role? What kind of education uh, are the people getting that are taking this test and scoring high? What kind of education are the people that are taking this test and scoring low? So is this test really only measuring raw intelligence, or is this also somewhat a reflection of uh, wealth, status, and because of those two things, probably also race? Um, you could begin to look past the simple um, percentages here and scores and begin to ask questions that aren't represented on this graph. And by doing so, you would be able to start making arguments from your analysis. I wonder what other kinds of statements of significance that you or you know that you either you would make or that you think that a quantitative researcher might make about this IQ score distribution data set. Certainly there's a lot of different questions that you could ask. Now, qualitative writers also make interpretations and describe the significance of information. But the information they interpret is not based in numbers. It's based on ideas. Could be historical ideas, economic, political, or cultural configurations. As an example of describing significance, below is a passage from The Significance of the Frontier in American History by Frederick Jackson Turner. Let's see what he says. At first, the frontier was the Atlantic coast. It was the frontier of Europe in a very real sense. Moving westward, the frontier became more and more American. As successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations. So we should go ahead and look at that. What's a terminal moraine? Glacially formed accumulation of unconsolidated glacial debris that occurs in both currently and formerly glaciated regions on Earth. So you can see some images of terminal moraines. Pretty cool. So there's the terminal moraine there. And there's the glacier. Okay. So, as successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations, so each frontier leaves its traces behind it. And when it becomes a settled area, the region still partakes of the frontier characteristics. Thus, the advance of the frontier has meant a steady movement away from the influence of Europe, a steady growth of independence on American lines. So notice that Turner begins by asserting a historical phenomenon, the frontier's successive western movement in the US. And we could even see history of the frontier. Okay, so 1860s, 1870 here. A lot of these states were formed around the same time, yet not many people were there. It was very empty. So when we talk about the American frontier, we talk about people moving further west. And you can see these blue states out here. This is all west, and it was unsettled for much of American history. Okay, so Turner begins by asserting a historical phenomenon, the frontier's successive western movement in the US. So people are continuing to move further and further west, more people pouring in until finally they reach California and they've settled everything. And Turner even provides an analogy of the frontier's change in position. He compares it to the slow, sure movement of a glacier that leaves behind a changed landscape, right? And we saw glacier landscape change. So the glacier moves through, it actually flattens everything. And so you can see here, the glacier moved right through this part, and that's all flat. Whereas the stuff around the glacier is still hilly or mountainous even. I used to live in Indiana, the state of Indiana, and where I lived was only maybe 30 minutes drive from the end of where the glacier came through. And so as soon as you get to where the glacier did not go, you have hilly landscapes. But until you get there, everything is just flat. And so the Midwest in America is totally flat because there was a glacier there that went through. Okay, so now we can ask the question. Oh yeah, after developing his subject, Turner provides a statement of significance. So our question we can ask, what is Turner's statement of significance? Take a second to think about it. And even get a pen out and scribble some notes down. Okay, so I've drawn a rough little picture here. You have Europe here, and you have the United States here. What Turner is talking about is that as the Americans go further west, as they settle the territory and go further in the frontier, they are physically getting further away from Europe, from the United Kingdom, that used to control the land. So that really is Turner's main idea. That's his statement of significance. Now let's look at a passage from an essay on video game violence. So what is it that puts video games in particular into the crosshairs of criticism? Do video games deserve all their negative publicity or not? Arguably, it is easy to see why there is a good deal of violence in video games. Exciting interaction beats boredom, and adolescents in particular, who feel little control over their lives or power in society, may gravitate to transgressive thrills of fighting, shooting, and war. And so that's an excerpt from the Routledge Companion to Video Game Studies. So take a second, or more than a second, take a minute and see if you can figure out what's the significant statement in this paragraph about video games. Take your handy pen and just take some notes. See what you can come up with. Okay, so what's the significant statement? What did you find? Did you find what I've got at the top here? That in life, there's little control. Whereas in a video game, a player has this transgressive thrill of fighting, shooting, and war. What's transgressive? It means to transgress means to do something that is normally not considered okay. Do a little. Infringe or go beyond the bounds, like a moral principle or other established standard of behavior. So you're going beyond the normal place that people would say, okay, that's okay. You've gone past it, and you get to experience war or killing or something. And so, in essence, it gives the player more control. They get to call the shots now in more ways than one. Okay. When you are looking for significant statements, when you're analyzing information, one thing that should help you is to remember this golden rule here. Everything has significance. We can make it yellow. Everything has significance. Now, the way to uncover significance is easy. Start by using these words to ask questions about your subject. And your last question should be why, but don't start with why. Start with what, and then where, when, who, how. So by asking those questions, you are gaining more information about your topic. When you ask why, you are going to arrive at a significant statement. But you can't really ask why until you've asked and satisfied with an answer those other questions. Now, in qualitative writing, describing significance is achieved by answering the why question. Importantly, this question cannot be properly asked before answering some or possibly all of the other questions. What, who, where, when, and how. Let's start with a subject, Elvis. You guys have heard of Elvis Presley, great singer from the 20th century. Good. Elvis Presley. There he is. He's a handsome dude, isn't he? I'm not going to try to Elvis impersonate. Even though I really want to, I'm not going to do it. Okay. Before it's possible to discuss the significance of Elvis, we have to describe him or some circumstances concerning him. Keep in mind that websites like Wikipedia are very good at providing topical information. Remember, topical was one of the words in our word bank. Topical information, topical, this means information about a topic, about some idea. If you want to know who, what, when, and how, Wikipedia will serve you well. Now, if you want to know why, you're the one that has to figure that out. Wikipedia doesn't always get to the why, but it will give you the who, what, when, how. It'll tell you all of that. Here's a section from Wikipedia's entry on Elvis. By the time Elvis graduated from high school, June 1953, he had already singled out music as his future. He was a regular audience member at the monthly all-night singings downtown, where many of the white gospel groups that performed reflected the influence of African American spiritual music. He adored the music of Black gospel singer Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Like some of his peers, he may have attended blues venues of necessity in the segregated South, but only the nights designated for exclusively white audiences. He listened to the regional radio stations, such as WDIA AM, that played race records, spirituals, blues, and the modern, backbeat-heavy sound of rhythm and blues. Many of his future recordings were inspired by local African-American musicians, such as Arthur Crudup and Rufus Thomas. B.B. King recalled that he had known Presley before he was popular, when they both used to frequent Beale Street. Now, notice that the previous passage describes who, what, when, and how. It almost describes why, the significance of this information, but beyond implication, does not quite do so. One significance that could be drawn from this passage is that Elvis's success in his music career can be traced back to the influence of the African American music he listened to as a teenager. So, in qualitative writing, it's not enough to stop where Wikipedia stopped. You have to take the extra step to discuss the importance of the information. That's the goal of qualitative writing. Let's look at an example of taking an extra step. Maybe you saw the movies The Hunger Games that were popular in recent years. we're going to work through some observations about the Hunger Games and see if we can get to a significant statement. So step one, start with an observation. In the Hunger Games, Katniss wins the games. Katniss Everdeen. Let's look at her. Katniss Everdeen. There she is. She, the actress that plays her, I believe is actually originally from Kentucky. So she's also from my home state. Go Kentucky, we're cool. Now, the athletic young men that compete in the Hunger Games don't win. And other capable women in the games, they do not win. No, it's Katniss that wins. So let's ask questions about this observation. She's the one that wins. Not any of the guys, not any of the other women. How did she win the games? Okay, answer. She exhibits qualities archetypically attributed to men and women, not just men, not just women. What are those qualities? Well, for men, it would be hunting, and for women, it would be nurturing. Now, I know that in the animal kingdom, like lions, the women do the hunting, but just go with it for now. So now we'll put the pieces together. Katniss wins the games by demonstrating the strength of a combination of traditionally feminine and masculine qualities. So here's a skeleton framework for getting to the significance of an idea. Step one, ask what happened. Step two, ask why did this happen? Step three, ask what are the consequences? And then four, and this is the thing that you don't get in Wikipedia, ask what are the broader implications of those consequences and make the connections. Let's look at another example. Step one, what happened? Mom got sick. Step two, why did it happen? She ate raw oysters. Okay, step three, what are the consequences? Well, I became scared. I was worried that she would get so sick that she might possibly not get better. And as she was sick, I realized, oh, I really love Mom. I want her to get better. Okay, and what are the broader implications of those consequences? Well, I realized the depth of my own love for Mother and that I have a capacity to care for others and to empathize with them. Now remember, more than one significance or interpretation can be drawn from any given text or event. Understanding significance occurs because of interest in a subject, an idea, an event. We naturally ask questions about the things that get our attention and interest us. Okay, let's try another example. Have any of you seen the movie Avalon? The Avalon. This is one of my favorite movies. Movie Avalon. There's a couple. The Avalon I like is this video game one. Yeah. It's kind of some images from it. Now, this is what Wikipedia says about Avalon. In the near future, many people are addicted to Avalon, a military-themed virtual reality shooter. In the game, solo players or parties Raid levels populated with AI-controlled enemies and opposing players. Winners are rewarded with experience points and in-game money, which can be exchanged for cash, allowing skilled players to make a living. As their brains interact with the game directly, Avalon places significant mental strain on players and has rendered players catatonic in many cases. So step one, what happened? Well, people played this game Avalon. It was a military-themed virtual shooter. And Solar players raid levels with these AI-controlled enemies in them and opposing players. So why did it happen? Well, because they get experience points and they get money that can be exchanged for real money, not just in-game money. And so some players make a living. That's why it's happening. What are the consequences? Mental strain. Some go catatonic. Catatonic. So this means you can't move, you can't do anything. An immobile or unresponsive stupor. Okay. So you'll notice again, Wikipedia doesn't move past those first three steps. As an encyclopedia, its goal is to explain what something is, what it does, what its effects are, but it's up to you to progress to step 4. So if we're thinking about this movie Avalon and we're getting to step 4, which is what are the broad implications of those consequences? Make connections. Well, we can think about players find video games more desirable than life. The game includes more immediate, clear-cut rewards than everyday life, causing players to look past the dangers of game playing. So going catatonic is actually akin to losing one's identity to a game. Now, on your own, I want you to use the skeleton framework, these 4 steps, to individually analyze the significance of an event that occurred to you in the past week or two, and also do it again for some aspect of a book, a movie, or television show that you've read or watched in the last month or so. Thank you very much for paying attention. I hope you're just really getting some more skills for your writing, and I very much appreciate your attention, and I know that we're going to have a great semester, and by the end, you're going to be just writing very strong academic papers. Okay, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you again soon.